What's up, podcast people? This is Michelle, just Michelle for now. I'm doing a bit of a Mark Maron intro because some of you will have noticed that this episode is a week late, and I wanted to go into the reason of why that was. Basically, I've mentioned on the podcast before, I've had some pretty gnarly mental health issues over the years. Sort of stopped me working. It's been pretty crap, but I'm mostly better now. But over the last week, I had a relapse, and it was a pretty boring one, to be honest with you. Like, it wasn't sexy, you know. There wasn't any walking around in the rain, or like, you know, punching walls, or getting into fights, or getting arrested or anything. It wasn't like that. It was very much lying in my room, ordering in lots of fried food, which, you know, you're in that bit, you kid yourself into thinking that the fried food will light up your brain like cocaine, but it doesn't. It doesn't work. Like, and, you know, fuck cocaine. Cocaine's a garbage drug. I'm not going to turn to that when I'm sad. Are you kidding? Like, so I basically just wasted this whole week not doing my job, which is to edit the podcast. Ashley, like, her role is usually to do, like, the social media, the publicising, you know, the stuff that's very much in her skill set. My skill set is I'm a massive fucking nerd, and I've been editing stuff for years, so I got that job, and I haven't done it. I haven't been pulling my weight. I haven't been pulling my weight because I've been sick. And I want to apologise for the podcast being late to the people that were in this episode. There are a couple of people we interview that will probably be wondering where the fuck this episode is. Sorry it's late. I got sick. It sucked. And yeah, I'm sorry it took so long. I want to thank Ashley for being really patient and really kind, because Ashley is fucking incredible. Like, I could have done this thing with other people who would have just been like, you know, Michelle, get your shit together, where's the podcast? Oh my god, you're such a shithead. And Ashley didn't do that. Ashley was supportive and kind and understanding, and talked me round when my brain was like firing on all cylinders. Now there's kids playing outside, so I'm probably going to wrap this up. Anyway, I want to thank everyone. I want to apologise to everyone. This is on me. This won't happen again. Now podcast is still going to be bi-weekly, but the next episode is going to be in 2 weeks from the day of release. So yeah, our schedule's going to change up slightly, but not really, if you see what I mean. So yeah, enjoy the episode.
Hello, and a very merry time zone appropriate salutation to you, and welcome to What the Trans?
What the Trans?
Yes, What the Trans, a podcast by the trans for the trans. How are you, Michelle?
I'm good. I protested Trump. I got sunburned. I went to Trans Pride. I think I saw you there. Were you there?
Yes, you know perfectly well you saw me there. We were both there at the Trans Pride Brighton, and it was splendid, and we're going to be talking a fair bit about that a little bit later on, aren't we?
Yes, let's do that. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm good. I too was sunburned. I got a nice sort of W-shaped sunburn on my back from the backless dress I was wearing. So, silly me. But never mind, it was a salutary reminder to wear sunscreen.
But it was totally worth it, because you look fantastic.
Thank you. And also I did have a splendid time at Brighton with most of my friends, honestly, you know, and it was great to see you in the flesh, and all of the other people who we got drunk with. So I'm still recovering from that, in a sense, because I only got home from that yesterday, so it's, you know, it's all fresh in the memory, as much as a series of blurred memories of evenings out can be.
Well, you sound good. Like, I mean, we could sound a lot worse, is what I'm saying. We could have gone there and eaten everything that was put in front of us, drank everything that was put in front of us, and just be a fucking state right now. And we're only maybe 25% of the state. I think.
We're definitely operating in the sort of 80% and above range, I would say. So which is reassuring. Although, having said that, a little bit later on, after a little bit too much coffee, that's probably going to dip to sort of maybe 60-70%. But before that happens, let's get on with the podcast, and let's slide right into our first segment in a slightly disgusting sort of a way, which is terrible news.
Terrible news!
We're going to have to think of a better name for that, but it's just so accurate. So yes, this is the sort of general news and nonsense roundup for the trans community this week. And first, in a jolly little coda to a story we covered last time, The actress Scarlett Johansson has now quit from a role she was cast in as a trans man in a film about mobster Dante Tex Gill. Now, she initially defended her casting, telling critics of the decision to take it up with Jeffrey Tambor and Jared Leto, both of whom are cis actors who have played a trans roles and are also definitely not problematic in some other way. Now, after a sustained backlash, which has included also a series of trans men auditioning for previous Scarlett Johansson roles, did you see that?
Yeah, I did. More of that.
Yeah, some of those were hilarious. Like a trans man, Black Widow, I thought was the absolute highlight of that. So the actress has opted to leave the role and apparently encouraged the production team to cast a trans actor in the role going forward. But it looks like a publication called The Wrap has quoted an insider on the project saying that things don't look good for the movie, and he suggested that the film might actually end up being shelved or cancelled rather than them recasting the lead. So,
well, I think this is the thing we were looking for. We were looking to have the story of a trans man completely removed from the movie landscape. So good job, everyone.
Yes, except also no, because that's don't do that, guys. That's completely the wrong decision to have made here. It's like, oh well, Scarlett Johansson's quit, so we're not going to do this film. But consider this whole backlash and the decisions people have made surrounding it has now in some ways drawn attention to this film. So you could, in fact, legitimately say, well, it's been publicized quite well, actually. There's clearly a market for it. Take a chance. Rather than saying, well, we need Scarlett Johansson because of the pull of her star power, do something different. And
why couldn't they have kept Scarlett Johansson as, one of the sex workers? Because that's what, Dante Gill was famous for. He was running, massage parlors, inverted commas. You could, if it was all about the star power, they could put the star power in other roles and just get this, trans guy from somewhere, pluck him up, make him a fucking superstar. That was an option instead of letting the whole project die.
I know. But, well, I mean, it says it's potentially shelved. I don't know if that means, completely cancelled. But, as we said last time, I want to see this film, right? So it's a film about a mobster, so it is a criminal. But people love those, right? People love those films. That's why The Godfather and endless mobster crime movies are so successful. Let's have some of that. Or an all trans Ocean's 11, perhaps.
Oh my god!
I know, trans heist movie. I want a trans heist movie. Someone do a trans heist
probably
movie.
Stop talking about doing that because somebody will steal it, and I think that should be us. I'm deadly serious. Actually, we should make that movie.
All right, fine. Well, let's start a crowdfunder for if people want us to make a trans heist caper movie set in, let's say, Yorkshire, and let's keep it within a reasonable budget instead of say, crowdfund us to go to the Caribbean.
No, screw any kind of budgetary considerations. We'd have trans people doing a heist in space.
Fine, brilliant, yes, okay.
And we'd film it in space.
Awesome, yeah. This is going to be one hell of a project. I suggest we move on from this.
Good point. This is gold, Ash. We don't want anyone listening to steal this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is definitely the primary concern. So moving on slightly, I would like genuinely to see some sort of thoughtful, nuanced, morally complex films with trans characters in them. Where it's it's not about necessarily the trans person and their individual struggles as that trans person. It's let's have just trans characters in things. Is that so much? Is that too much of a thing to ask? Anyway, so moving on, back to the UK, and those jolly little scamps over at Woman's Place UK had a little get-together with tea, crumpets, and a vile burning hatred of trans people in Brighton not long ago, which was an interesting move since Trans Pride Brighton was scheduled to take place a little bit later on that week. The event was also attended by protesters outside the venue. So the Jury's Inn, which has hosted the event, has since faced calls to apologise for essentially enabling hate speech and transphobia. And one attendee of the meeting, and I thought this was interesting because they posted afterwards on Mumnet saying, Mumsnet, which is something of a hotbed of this kind of activity, perhaps we could say, said that they had attended to try and understand why so many members of said website were so fired up with and obsessed with trans people. But instead of the promised reasoned discussion about, these potentially valid concerns, the event just degraded into slurs and jeering pretty rapidly, apparently, according to somebody who attended. So, this is a problem, but it keeps coming up, doesn't it? Because, each time this particular organisation will organise one of these meetings, sometimes the venue will pull out and they'll be criticised if they don't. So this is an ongoing saga in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I can see how it happened. I can see that, like, they were taking bookings. They got an email from somebody from awomensplace.com or whatever. They were like, oh, okay, this isn't unusual for Brighton for a bunch of feminists to show up and want to talk about stuff. We'll let it happen. And then suddenly you've got like 50 trans people outside, and you're just like, oh god, we done fucked up.
Whoops.
But their lack of communication afterwards is a bit concerning, I would say. But I mean, it's good to see people coming out against that. Like, looking at pictures of it, there were people from like, not just trans people, but there were plenty of cis people protesting as well. I mean, if you do that kind of meeting in a place as inclusive as Brighton, you're going to get backlash from all sorts of people. So that was good to see. So I guess that's something to take from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, inevitably this just degrades into an argument about free speech, doesn't it? But, I think the protesters who attended to say, look, we object to these people's presence in Brighton, these people who call themselves feminists, and they've got a right to free speech as well, which, yeah, I saw some photographs of the protesters myself. It was very colourful, wasn't it, as these things so often are? Yeah, I mean, so Women's Place UK are not a particularly nice bunch of folk, unfortunately, and because in a sense, like, why is there a need for so many of these meetings? Everybody's essentially repeating the same thing every time. It's the same sort of small cluster of speakers. And then everybody just expresses their support and jeers about famous trans people and statements that they've made and goes, that's kind of all it is. One wonders why it's really necessary to have so many meetings.
Well, I guess because sitting in a room full of people like yourself, just like putting all the world's ills on one easily identifiable group of people instead of understanding the world complexly is a lot of fun. It's
nuanced.
Easier than walking around just being like, I exist. I'm not going to at some point. Space is insane. None of this being alive stuff makes sense. I know. There's this room full of people that will tell me that everything wrong in my life is because of X, Y, and Z. Oh, that's so much better than having to think.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I would totally buy some of that if somebody was selling that, I think. But that's probably why I'm pretty susceptible to, I guess that makes me pretty susceptible to certain religions and stuff as well. But at least with religions, you tend to feel better and try to help people the vast majority of the time. Whereas this is, well, it's just a mechanism of hate that humans respond to.
But there is something else to note as well, because this group of people who call themselves feminists, there's also a thing currently which is, and I can't actually take this particularly seriously, it's Rapid Onset Gender Dysphoria Week, right? And so Rapid Onset Gender Dysphoria is essentially a kind of people who call themselves feminist dog whistle for saying, oh, my son was affected by rapid onset gender dysphoria and now he insists he's my daughter. And it's like, that's legit not how it works at all.
By the diagnosis requirements that they have sort of invented on Twitter, I had rapid onset gender dysphoria when I was 26.
Nice. Well, so and clearly it's not a childhood issue, and you see, because it's such a massive issue, but it is obviously it's just a bullshitty fake science thing that they've made it to sound scary and make it sound like a social contagion. And by doing that, they say, oh well, if our children are exposed to the idea of gender identity and gender flexibility and gender dysphoria and same-sex relationships and whatever, society will collapse because because that's absolutely a bad thing and we should stop our kids from ever learning about it, and so we should stamp out this social contagion, rapid onset gender dysphoria. And that's used as a way of denying agency and sort of denying visibility to trans people.
It's not a new thing either, because they definitely had the same thing going in the 80s about, like, homosexuality and stuff, where they were just like, well, if we expose people to homosexual propaganda, they might get some wrong ideas, go out there, have some gay sex, get some AIDS, and die. We've got to stop this now. It's almost exactly the same thing.
Exactly, it's the same sort of base of rhetoric, and as has been observed by a number of people, this is a lot of stuff repeating itself. It's the same lies being told about, a very vulnerable and marginalized community. So yes, a lovely bunch of people, and sod a woman's place. I jolly well wish they didn't exist, but is that libellious? I don't know. Just please stop. Get a hobby like ships in bottles, or reading lovely queer literature. Just
Well, get abortions for people in Northern Ireland. You know what I'm saying? Like if we take the thing that transgender people are like a threat to cis women. If we take that as a thing, then by the sheer numbers of trans women that exist in the world, it would be just like blaming Luxembourg for climate change. It would be that equivalent, is what I'm saying. Like, they think that we are this huge mountain where on their terms, just with the numbers, we are a molehill at best. And that's even if you agree with what they're saying, which most good people don't, because what they're saying is stupid.
And not backed up.
It just doesn't make sense with the numbers.
Indeed, and what they're saying is not backed up by any level of evidence. It's just not. Like, if trans women were genuinely a threat to any, cis women or anybody else in public spaces and public bathrooms and whatever, there would be sort of statistical analysis demonstrating the fact, and there aren't. It's just that evidence is not there because it's not a thing. So there you go. Surprisingly enough, an extremist group is lying to further its agenda. What an astonishing conclusion. But let's move on. And in another follow-up to something that we've spoken about before, and in the same waters as our previous story, after London Pride seemed to allow a group of anti-trans protesters to lead its parade, over 2,000 people have signed an open letter calling for a change at London Pride and condemning the anti-trans protesters as exclusionary and divisive. So the letter, which was started by Amy Challoner, who's a trans woman and an equality spokesperson for the Green Party of England and Wales, and called for a full apology, among other things, and state that Pride in London should have known better. So Pride in London had said that they took the uncomfortable decision to let the protesters march because of safety concerns, but that is largely dismissed by the letter as not being good enough and not being believed. So, yes, this was an interesting sort of series of developments since that happened, because that was very fresh when we talked about it last, wasn't it?
Yeah, and by the looks of it, like, not just in this open letter, but on Twitter, on social media, there's been thousands upon thousands of people slating London Pride for letting this happen, and thousands, it looks like, of cis people who have been standing up and have now seen what these people are about, and they don't like it, which is pretty good to see. Like, after all these years of... I mean, there's been people speaking out and stuff for years and years, but I've never seen anything like this before. Like, you've got, like, the editor of Diva, the lesbian and queer women online magazine and paper magazine, coming out with a statement. You've got people from Stonewall coming out with statements. It's just a fully fledged rejection of everything these people are about, and I gotta say, as a trans woman, that I feel included. I feel like I'm being...
Yes.
I feel like people have got my back, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that's new, isn't it? That's not something I feel very often. It's like, oh, wow, okay, but there was whole hashtags surrounding it. L with the T, where cis lesbians posting their support and condemning the actions of these anti-trans lot. That was glorious to see, to be perfectly honest. It's like, oh, wow, okay, awesome, people noticed, finally. Gosh. Well, I'm glad you're with the program. Now let's sort this out, shall we? But yeah, that was a super thing to be seeing over the last couple of weeks, I must say. That wholehearted rejection of what these people stand for.
I think we should move on because I've got some good news.
Ah, yes, indeed. You have the fun news, don't you? Well, go on, fire away.
English schools will introduce lessons on the LGBT agenda, the hope being that the powerful LGBT lobby will be able to drive up recruitment and indoctrination by as much as 84%.
Awesome. We've been waiting for this day for a long time.
We're going to get them young.
Gotta get them young.
But in actual news, the government has published a draft of the new relationships and sex education guidance for English schools that will make health education compulsory for all students and will now include education on LGBT and gender identity issues. I mean, this is fantastic, right?
Yes, it is. And lots of people have been campaigning for sex and relationship education for a long time. So this is absolutely a welcome step. So what's going to be included then? Do we have some details about what's there?
I went through the draft. I mean, the draft itself is pretty simple. It's only about 5 pages of basically amending certain acts, like the Schools Act of 1996 and things like that. But basically, it boils down to a revised guidance on health education, making it compulsory, with reformed relationships education in primary schools and reformed sex education in secondary schools. So, as it's going to work, health education is going to include lessons on healthy lifestyle, mental health, that kind of thing, safety online, safety in online spaces, and trying not to lose your fucking mind looking at Twitter, basically, by the sounds of it. Primary school relationship education will include age-appropriate lessons on healthy friendships, family relationships, and other relationships that they are likely to encounter. And once they get to secondary school, they're going to build on that with lessons about intimate relationships, romantic relationships, including LGBT relationships. And at some point during their career, at some point during their education, the kids will be introduced to the idea of gender identity, transgender issues, and that kind of thing. There's now going to be a 12-week consultation on the implementation and content of these new guidelines, so you can check that out on the government consultations website. Go in there and have your say. Got some quotes from the guidance right here. By the end of primary school, people should know that other families, either in school or in the wider world, sometimes look different from their family, but that they should respect those differences and know that other children's families are also characterized by love and care for them. People should be taught the facts and the law about sex, sexuality, sexual health, and gender identity in an age-appropriate and inclusive way. All pupils should feel that the content is relevant to them and their developing sexuality. So that all sounds good. It's a little vague on what parts they're actually going to teach. I'm sure that will probably come out after the consultation, where there will be more guidance and stuff. But yeah, it sounds good, right?
It absolutely does. And the way I think the thing is, this isn't going to be a case of even necessarily teaching the ins and outs of, say, polyamorous relationship to a bunch of 5-year-olds. It is just going to be a case of saying some families are different from yours, isn't it? And it's like, rather than making it like overtly LGBT in content, you just simply make it LGBT inclusive. So some people are gay, some people are bi, some people are trans, and actually all of those things are fine, and it's possible, and if not even likely, that you will encounter such individuals as you move through the world. So yes, absolutely, it's giving kids and young adults this, kind of what they need to know about that, and the fact that although it used to be absolutely stigmatized, it no longer is and shouldn't be considered as such. So this is all absolutely very positive stuff. And, even this is going to be vastly of benefit to the entire society, isn't it? Rather than simply the proportion of it which is LGBT, because what they're talking about is the health education, including, as you say, a healthy lifestyle and mental health, and that is going to be extremely important, isn't it? And it's interesting that that's part of an overall reform to sex education and relationship education, but it is, that's something that is going to be of benefit across the board, right? By saying that, in your life, you might encounter a period where things are very, very bleak and it can be very, very difficult. And actually, you're not alone when that occurs. And here's how you get help, and here's what you can do. And, be aware of it and don't be ashamed of it. That's possibly the the most valuable thing, right? Because that's going to have a massive impact on all of the students that come through the system. Everybody's, straight, cis, bi, trans, whatever. That's... So I welcome these proposals, but obviously the consultation is the key part, isn't it? If you're UK based, well, England based specifically, isn't it?
Yeah, this is English guidance.
So yes, if you're here in jolly little rainy fascism islands, specifically in England, then please do fill out the consultation for an inclusive and thing as possible. Just go do the thing. Go fill it out. You know what I mean.
Go do the thing.
It's all there on the website, and this is the chance to make everything inclusive and welcoming for everybody.
Yeah, these new guidelines should come in. They should start to be enforced around September 2020, and yeah, like you said, I think the people it's going to affect the most are going to be future LGBT kids who aren't going to have what you and I had going through school, thinking that we're a bunch of freaks. It's basically like the anti-Section 28.
Yes.
Which is exactly what is needed. It's going to solve a lot of potential problems for young LGBT people growing up, and all children growing up, I'm sure.
Absolutely. All right, rock and roll. Love it. So I hope that consultation produces the appropriate results and changes occur. Moving on. What's next?
Sticking with the kids. We're still with the kids. Basically, the Irish government are considering extending legal gender recognition to children of any age after a report commissioned by the Minister for Social Protection, Regina Doherty, recommended the changes. These will include, the recommendations include a separate administrative process that would require parental consent for, changing a child's legal gender, a straightforward revocation process, I'm assuming, if the child at some point changes their mind, or any other number of things can happen. And they're also proposing recognising non-binary people and providing access to intersex people. These recommendations, if implemented, would make Ireland the most legally inclusive country in the world for trans people of all shapes and sizes, whilst the UK can't even recognise non-binary people.
Well, that's awesome for Ireland and kind of depressing here. But that's why you should all fill out the other consultation, by the way. The one that we mentioned last time, the government consultation about the reform of the Gender Recognition Act. But this is fantastic news. So the recommendations are, one of them is separate administrative process that requires parental consent, which you could see that in some cases that might stymie it a little bit if the parents are not being supportive. But obviously if the young person has got extremely supportive parents and there's been a lot of self-expression and conversation and so on, likely that's going to be okay. But but these are just recommendations, aren't they? So they're considering doing this, but these are recommendations that have been made. So none of this is actually in stone. What happens next with this particular thing before it actually becomes law?
Well, I'd imagine that they're probably going to do a bit of one of the Irish government committees will do an evidence gathering session of some kind to get some more information. Maybe there will be a few more reports down the line, but I'm guessing at some point someone in the government is going to bring all this up in a new act or something, I'd imagine, down the line. But honestly, it's hard to tell at this point. I'm only speculating, but with this Irish government that brought in all the self-declaration stuff in 2015, they've showed their hand. They are behind trans people, and they are more than willing to do things to make lives easier for people like us. So I would be very surprised if they didn't move forward with this in some way. And we will keep you updated on this stuff as it develops.
Yes, here for all your breaking news every fortnight. Yeah, rock and roll. Anyway, so moving on, next bit of the show.
All right, let's have some transgender pop culture disorder.
That sounds splendid. And what is on our transgender pop culture disorder menu this week?
Well, there's been quite a bit of news. Kicking off, my favourite new show of all time, Pose, has been renewed for a second season. Huzzah!
Yay!
FX made the announcement 2 episodes before the series finale, which aired on last Sunday, showing that they clearly like the numbers Pose is bringing in. The series has achieved immense critical acclaim and is fantastic. I promised you before we started recording that I wouldn't gush too much about Pose.
Yes, it's in the notes. It's in the notes for the episode, Michelle. It says, do not pose rent.
I am trying my best. I'm trying to keep it in. There's still no news on when the show is coming to the UK, but I would be astonished if nobody picked this show up at some point, even if it is just like on one of those Channel 5 subsidiaries at 2 a.m. But I will let you know the second it lands on the UK shores, because it is fantastic.
Please do.
Moving on, the CW have finally released more information about the trans woman who will be joining my other favourite show, Supergirl. We first talked about this in our very first episode, but now we actually know who this person is. Let me go through it.
Yes.
The character is called Nia Nal, and will be played by activist and actor Nicole Maines. The character Nia will join the show as a journalist for Catco, basically where Kara/Supergirl works, and will be taken under Kara/Supergirl's wing, both as a journalist and a new superhero for Fortune City. Not Fortune City, for Central City. Nia will eventually, over Season 4, become Dreamer, a superhero based on Dream Girl, a hero who was briefly a member of the Legion of Superheroes, and is so deep in the DC Universe lore, I had never heard of them, and I had to do lots of research to find out who they were. My guess is that they've done this because they want the freedom to do what they want with the character, and I'm pretty sure Dream Girl wasn't trans before, so that's something. Nicole Maines said at the San Diego Comic-Con, "It seems only fitting that we have a trans superhero for trans kids to look up to." And
Yes.
I'm saying yes to that. The kids need a trans superhero, and Dreamer is the one.
Yes. No, I mean, that sounds great. Obviously, that's going to be awesome.
The thing I'm most excited about, in a way, is that sometimes the TV shows, when it comes to these kind of things, introduce characters that end up showing up in the main continuity. For example, from the Batman animated series in the 90s, Harley Quinn was an original character made up for that, and Harley Quinn is now a staple in the DC universe, has her own line of comics, and usually shows up in Batman things, and is currently dating Poison Ivy in the comics. But that's a whole other rant for another day. Basically, I would be very surprised if they didn't take Dreamer or Dream Girl or whatever they're going to call her and basically shove her directly into her own comic at some point, because DC could take the ball and run with this and basically have the first trans superhero in their comic line.
That would be pretty sweet. That would be pretty good. I'd like to see that. And, as the actress said, it's like, all the trans kids look like... Seeing that, looking up to that, wonderful. Looking forward to it. What's next?
Oh, just to say that Supergirl will return to Sky One before the end of the year.
Rock and roll.
Just so people can go and actually watch this one. God, I hope someone picks up Pose. Because I need to see the last 4 episodes. Like, they've come out and people have been raving about them. I'm just sat here in this country like a dick. Just... Then anyway, finally, the last bit of news is... Steven Universe creator Rebecca Sugar comes out as a non-binary woman, surprising almost no one. This isn't really a huge surprise looking at how inclusive Steven Universe is. I mean, recently the show had a gay wedding between Ruby and Sapphire, 2 non-binary female characters on the show who sort of look after Steven, as in the title characters from Steven Universe. It's basically full of queer stuff from the get-go. Not just the usual, signposting or little hints like you may have seen in Legend of Korra or Adventure Time. We're talking like, oh, these people are unambiguously going out, or these people are unambiguously trans, or these people are unambiguously gay, or stuff like that. Rebecca Sugar told NPR recently, "One of the things that's really important to me about the show is that the gems are all non-binary women. They're very specific, and they're coming from a world where they don't really have the frame of reference. They're coded female, which is very important. I was really excited because I felt like I had not seen this. To make a show about a young boy who was looking up to these female-coded characters. They appeared to be female, and they're a little more representative of non-binary women. They wouldn't think of themselves as women, but they're fine with being interpreted that way amongst humans. And I am also a non-binary woman, which has been really great to express myself through these characters, because it's very much how I have felt throughout my life." So what I think she's saying there is that the queers have taken over children's television.
Hurrah! Yep, totally here for this. That's excellent. So I have a confession to make. I haven't actually seen any Steven Universe, even though literally everybody keeps telling me to. So I will do that at some point.
I get the impression that a lot of people give you lists of things to do, and you are being completely, including me, and you have been completely buried in them.
You might, yes, you're not wrong there, to be perfectly honest. But there's enough memes about Steven Universe, so I've kind of gotten the gist of the show, and it's as you say, like, if these themes are in children's television, that's all to the good, isn't it? It's just like, open, inclusive, lovely, queer things happening, and that's cool because,
and it's really funny. I mean, you can have as many queer themes as you like, but if the show isn't good, then no one's going to watch it. Whereas Steven Universe is excellent, like even for grown-ups like me. Although I say grown-ups in inverted commas.
Yeah, I was, that did give me pause, I must confess. So,
hey, I wish I would try and argue otherwise, but right now my desk has got a Charizard beanie, a Captain America soft toy, and a weird devil thing.
Right.
Although I've got to admit, I did win the Captain America thing whilst incredibly drunk on Brighton Pier, so I think that counts as an adult soft toy, right? Just on the basis of how I got it.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. If the alcohol was involved, it's not for children, essentially. Cool, awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Good for the transgenderous pop culturing disorders. I really want to see Pose. I absolutely do. But that's enough. That's enough of Pose before you get started again. Let's get on to let's boogie on over to the next section, which is the hot take. And actually, this hot take is actually particularly scorching because it is Trans Pride Brighton 2018, which is where we both were at the weekend, and it was absolutely boiling hot. I think there was sunburn, there was a lot of water, there was marching, there were flags, there was all sorts of things. So yeah. Trans Pride Brighton, how was yours, Michelle?
Mine was good but brief. I was only really there for the Saturday with the march and the park stuff and the after party, and I had to come straight back because on the next day because I'm fairly broke and those are the cheapest tickets I could get.
Fair enough.
Like, I would have loved to have stayed all weekend, but it would have been double the price of the coach because I got the coach because, again, I'm poor. But you managed to get there for a lot longer. You were there from the Thursday till the Monday, right?
Yes, I did that. So yeah, I was there for, I wouldn't say the whole thing because actually Trans Pride Brighton had a whole series of events that week, didn't it? There was like various poetry nights, film nights, all sorts of things happening in the run-up to it for the whole week. So, yeah, I'm sure the organisers were kept terribly busy.
Yeah, I was looking at the run-up to the stuff, and there was so much. Like, when I first went there in 2014, I think I went to the second one. I didn't go to the first, and I haven't been to one since, except for this one, obviously.
Yeah.
Right, there was basically a few things on the Friday night, then there was the parade, the Pride thing, and then there was the after party. And in that second year, the after party was about 40 people in, like, a youth community centre.
Right.
About 20 minutes drive away from the centre. At least that's how long it took me to get there on the bus.
I see.
And Bethany Black, the comedian, did a set there in front of maybe 10 people really early in the night. And it was a bit, I don't know, it was a bit of a weird one because the space wasn't really an after party thing. And I sort of left it thinking, oh, it's this small community thing. And then looking at all the events that have been happening over the last week and then going there now, it's like quadrupled in size easily. There was just so many people.
So I was there last year, and I was only there briefly last year as well, which was why I wanted to go and stay longer. And so I was really only there for the Saturday, and it rained last year as well, and this time it did not. And so we did the march, which was that was excuse me. So we did the march, and so I'm sure you were stood right near them, weren't you? There was like a group of cis lesbians with signs that were saying, we support you, and trans lives are valid and stuff, just as we were starting off. So, that was super to see because I think, as has been acknowledged by a few other people, and I think we were all a bit tense about it, weren't we, to an extent, because of the events with the anti-trans protesters at Pride in London. So
yeah, I was on the lookout But then...
I think we all were.
But then after a couple of minutes, I just sort of got into it and started chanting and stuff. And I mean, I got swept away just by, again, how big it was. Like,
yeah.
When I was waiting for you, like, I got there late because, you know, I'm a rock star.
Of course, yeah.
Basically. And you were somewhere, and basically the parade started outside the Marlborough pub. That's like the famous queer lesbian pub. And I was waiting for you, and I just saw maybe 2,000 people walk by in the march before I got to you. It took like 20 minutes for the march to actually get to you, wherever you were stood. Like, I remember messaging you, and you said, "We've not started marching yet." And they'd already been marching past me for 5 minutes. Like, your section hadn't even started yet. If that gives you an impression of... That gives you, the listeners, an impression of how big this was. Like...
It was estimated that there were, what, like 5,000 people?
Yeah, I've read 3,000 some places, 5,000 other places. I have no idea how many people were there.
Loads.
Lots.
But there were loads. Yeah. And even just sort of out and about all round Brighton the entire weekend, that really was the case, and you know, even that was a joy to see, of course.
Oh yeah, my Trans Pride started on the coach because there was like 4 or 5 trans people on the coach with me, like going up on Friday. And I was just like, okay. And then we got the bus from my mate's place to go down to the start of the parade, and there were people all like painted up on the bus and just
people all transed up.
We took over Brighton.
Yeah,
we took over the Brighton beachfront for at least 12 hours.
Yep, that was us. So if you were driving through Brighton and were delayed by a splash of colour, we can only apologise, but also, you know, so what?
Yeah, we were the fucking normals that day. We were the cis that day. They were all the transes. Now they know how it feels.
Well, I mean, sort of, but also, you know, it was sort of walking up one side of the road next to the sea, and the other side of the road, the traffic is still moving. Oh, for God's sake, yawning. So we were walking up one side of the seafront, and obviously on the other side, the traffic was still moving, going past us. But a lot of people were like, you know, opening the windows and beeping the horns and leaning out and saying, "Yes, awesome, Trans Pride," and sort of supporting us and stuff. There was a lot of that, wasn't there? Which was like pretty super. I thought, yay, validation, or at least sort of support.
That was amazing. Like all the people honking and stuff. Like maybe some of them probably had no idea what it was.
Yeah, they were just sort of swept away by the moment. Yes.
The only disappointing thing I had all weekend was that my chant that I tried to get started did not work. I tried to get started. Don't define us by our junk. But nobody came with me on that, so I was just a crazy idiot on Brighton beachfront, just yelling about my junk, and nobody joined me.
Well, that's... Yes, I know. I was there. It's just... I think there's an art to a chant. I don't know what it is. I couldn't possibly dream to give you advice, but for some reason it just didn't catch on. But never mind.
Weirdly, for a bit, my chant about Theresa May caught on.
That's true. But in fairness, like, so I was there for a holiday, right? So this is like the first Pride event in I don't know how long that I've been to where I've not been in some way responsible for something. Last year I was there, I was selling t-shirts. When I'm at Sparkle, I'm doing like panel discussions or screen printing. You know, and I've occasionally worn the LGBT Foundation's t-shirt to this place or that place. I've got one of them coming up in August, you know, and it's like, I was there on holiday, and there was a point on the Sunday, so this was after you'd gone home and after the big night out, the after party, and I met an old friend of mine and her partner on the beach. We went swimming in the sea for a little while.
Was that on the Saturday night?
No, this was on the Sunday afternoon.
Oh, right, sorry.
And then I sort of, you know, we parted company there, and then I was walking along Brighton seafront, and I got an ice cream from an ice cream van, and I was walking along with my ice cream along Brighton seafront, having just been swimming in the sea, and there was just a sort of lovely sense of British correctness to it. I was like, "Yep, this is what I do. This is what I do when I'm on holiday. This is just classic something." But yes, it was wonderful, and a lot of people have commented that it's not like a lot of other Pride events that go on, because it is, you know, it definitely centers the trans community, doesn't it? And it's so liberating to be in that space and to be there and to sort of know it's safe and be supported. And I think this manifested itself in a couple of quite interesting ways. And the one that I particularly noticed was everybody was just like, to everybody else, people were like, "Oh wow, I love your hair," or "Your shoes are amazing," or "Your outfit's great," or whatever. And it was just people were doing that to me, and I was like, "Wow, I must look great." But then I noticed, well, no, hang on, we're all doing it. Because I was saying, "Oh wow, it's lovely to meet you. I really love that thing that you have, whatever it is, bag shit." Because everybody had something cool, right? These are trans people. Everybody was beautiful. Everybody had, some way of engaging conversation with them just by looking so damn great. So, and there was just everybody was there affirming each other the entire time, affirming and supporting one another, and just in sort of a number of small little ways. And it was like a phrase I heard used was like defiance at the outside world, defiance at the fact that we need a trans pride sort of thing, defiance at all of those bad things, expressed as us all really supporting and complimenting and interacting with each other in that way. It was wonderful. It was a really, really great event, and long may it continue, and I absolutely want to carry on going again. But we talked to a couple of people while we were down there, didn't we?
Yeah, we went around as roving reporters with our little microphones, talking to some people. We probably should.
And our flyers. Let's not forget our flyers.
Yes, and we flyered. We got through, maybe 300 flyers?
Well, yes, we got through a bunch of...
we probably should have done the talkie stuff at, the park event.
Maybe.
Because mostly...
Perhaps.
We got around to doing it on the night, a few drinks had been had, a few boozers had been ingested, but everyone we talked to was really professional. I got talking to Sarah Savage about the event. Sarah Savage has been a prominent activist for years. She founded Trans Pride back in 2013, and she's sort of the mistress of ceremonies this year by leading the parade. I got talking to her in the beer garden of the pub about what she was trying to do and stuff. So yeah, let's listen.
My name is Sarah Savage. I'm a trustee for Trans Pride Brighton. I'm a children's author. I'm an activist. I'm a shit stirrer, and my pronouns are she and her.
So Sarah, how was your Pride this year?
My Pride was amazing. There was so much tension leading up to it because we were so worried that there was going to be some anti-trans protesters. We prepared so much because we expected it. And then I think the crowd gathered outside the Marley kind of felt that, It really felt like you could feel it in the atmosphere. We were ready for something to kick off. And then nothing kicked off, and everything went to plan, and everybody had an amazing time, and it's just blown my mind.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, why do you think your event, Trans Pride Brighton, is important?
It's important because other prides don't actually represent trans people. Trans Pride Brighton puts the T first. Trans people are the number one kind of reason we exist, and we recognise that minorities are more important. So we have to do that, and we have to support minorities, and we have to amplify their voices. And that's what Trans Pride does from the start.
Cool. So what's been the weirdest experience this year with organising and events on the day? I mean, if you've got nothing, that's cool, but I got to ask.
Weird experience, right? I am proper radical, right? And I am probably anti-police if you look into me enough. And the weirdest experience was sitting down with the chief superintendent and telling him why trans people would not like the police to march with us, pointing out that this is partially a protest against the police, and that it would be really fucking weird for them to come and stand in and march with us. They didn't seem to understand that, so it was really, really cool that I finally managed to hammer it into their heads that this is a protest against the way that trans people are treated by the justice system and by the police as a whole. So it was surreal, but it was really affirming for me, I The art of saying fuck you without saying fuck you.
I like it. Okay, this is the bit on like the end of the... Oh, we swear like nobody's business on the pod. This is like the bit at the end of like the job application. We just like write any supporting statements here. Is there anything you want to say to our audience of like 50 people?
Come to Trans Pride next year, talk about Trans Pride online, look at the pictures, share the hashtags, donate, visit the website transpridebrighton.org, and come next year.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And now back to the studio or something. Oh God, how do I turn this off?
Yes, wise words from Sarah Savage there, and I particularly like how she's a proper radical and makes no secret of the fact, right? So she's not pulling any punches when she speaks to people like ourselves, is she? And it's what you want, and she's not wrong, of course, with reference to, the initial impetus for what we would call the Pride movement now was an anti-police riot. So
yeah, I didn't really get that when I was marching because I saw police there, and they were just sort of off to the sides, I guess, for like safety reasons. Like I didn't cotton on to the fact that they were sort of rejected by the Pride.
Well, they were not present in the park, were they? Now, as you mentioned, there were a few uniformed officers outside of it, but in the actual space itself, there were not any uniformed police officers, which is something that Sheffield Pride have also, I think, managed to do in previous years, because there have been instances where, like, a hate crime has been committed in the park, and Sheffield police have not actually acted in any appropriate sort of a way. So
yeah, I've had a pretty mixed experiences with the police in London. Like there was one time back when I was smoking cigarettes, I was in Croydon. My friend needed me to hand in a document at their like housing support office, and he couldn't leave the house because he was disabled at the time. So I was there. I was just smoking a cigarette, and then I put it on the floor like I'd done a million times before. And a police officer came up to me and said, "You've just committed a crime. We're going to fine you £80. And I was like, damn. And then somebody walked past me and just screamed faggot in my face and walked off. And I just looked around to the police and said, "Nothing? You're not going to do anything about that?" They were like, "Here's your fine." I was like, "Oh, well, thanks."
that's disappointing.
Yeah, it really did. It discoloured my appreciation for our police service, really. Like, they were more concerned about like a cigarette end rather than a goddamn hate crime. And so I totally get it. Like, I always thought it was a bit odd when, like, in London Pride, the police are allowed to march, the military are allowed to march. It's like, you haven't been very fond of us. Like, back in the 80s, you used to raid all of, like, the queer spaces all the time, looking for drugs and reasons to beat up queer people. Now here you are, like, the fuck?
Yes, indeed. And so...
Also, what was interesting was that, like we mentioned before, she was worried about, the sort of protester thing coming in, and then it not happening, and them having to put in loads of work for it. Like, I was looking out for it, but I would have been surprised if, the turf element did come out, because their MO seems to be wanting to make the news and also to spread their message of hate to people who aren't trans. Like, that's why they wanted to lead Pride in London, because they had a whole audience of people to distribute their shitty literature to. Like, who would they have been able to hand out the literature to at that thing? Like, if they showed up at Trans Pride, chances are they would have gotten some trouble. Like, I don't think there would have been any violence necessarily, but they would have been heavily outnumbered by lots of people shouting.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the extent that Trans Pride actually did issue some guidance before the march, didn't they? Say, if these people turn up, if they're there, present, don't look at them, don't engage with them, don't give them ammunition by in any way baiting them or trying to be violent. Just sort of, and obviously film if you feel particularly threatened. So fortunately that guidance didn't turn out to be necessary, but yeah, absolutely people were certainly on edge before the parade started. But it all went off jolly well, didn't it? Which, must be absolutely fabulous for the team to see it all go, okay, we were so concerned about this and it's not happened. Wonderful. Anxiety is at least partially lifted.
So yeah, I also got talking to Sabah Choudrey. Do you know them?
Yes, indeed. Well, indeed. Obviously, we've met several times, and we spoke just before you conducted the interview, of course, because I was there on that occasion.
Well, I'll play the tape, shall I?
Yes, play the tape.
Hello, my name is Sabah Choudrey. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm so happy to be on What the Trans. I'm at Trans Pride Brighton, and actually this year has been really special because there's been such a presence of queer and trans and intersex people of colour. We've had our own tent and like a space for us to exist, and it's been really lovely. We've had like workshops and panels all day, and just a place where we can exist and say like, you know what, yeah, we're here and we're a part of the community. And I think that's so important, taking up space, yeah.
Nice. So why is Trans Pride important to you?
Oh my goodness. So I'm one of the co-founders of Trans Pride Brighton, and it was just born out of like absolute necessity. We were desperate. We were like, why the heck are we not here in Brighton Pride? Why are we continuing to fight to be involved in Brighton LGBT Pride? Why can't we just take to the streets? And actually, like, back then, years ago, it was terrifying. Like, I remember we were talking about like walking up like Churchill Street and like Churchill Square and just being like, I was actually terrified. I was like, as if visible like trans people and gender non-conform people are gonna like walk up like one of the main streets in Brighton and just be like, we're here. I was like envisioning like 10 like visibly trans people and like so scared. And now we're here and we have a march of like thousands of people. Like, oh my god.
That was special.
Oh my god, yes. And the most special part is that so many people want this to happen, not just trans people. Like the council are behind us, cis people are behind us, straight people behind us, like lesbian, gay, bisexual people are behind us. They all want it to happen, and that's amazing. And like you can see it today. Yeah,
that's wonderful. Yeah. So has there been any particular? Were you involved in organising this year or?
No, not this year. So I was involved from the start. Yeah, so I was involved from the start, and then I took a break. So I left Brighton for like many reasons, and just kind of like took a back seat. But actually, it enabled me to bring some amazing like trans young people from London through the organisation I work for, Gender Intelligence, to come here and to march and to have a presence. Because I think like youth empowerment and youth presence in the trans community is so important. Because like, I know it sounds so cliche, corny, but youth are the future. Like, they've got it going on. Like, they've got so much power and energy and passion. Like, we need to make space for them. And it's so nice just to see them there and enjoying it and realizing this is your community, this is your family, you belong here, this is your space to be celebrated. Take up the space.
If this was a job application, this is the bit at the end where it's just like, if you'd like to offer a supporting statement, say it now. So is there anything else you would like to say?
Gosh.
If he's not, it's okay.
Just like, if you're listening to this, like, talk about it with someone, anyone. Continue the conversations. Talk about gender diverse people. Like, deconstruct gender, the binary, masculinity, femininity, like, keep it going. Because, like, gender liberation doesn't just affect trans people, like, it affects everyone. And it just makes the world a better place for everyone. Gender stereotypes harm everyone, not just trans people, not just non-binary people. Like, it hurts us all, because we're all a part learning. We've all learned the same BS behaviors around like sexism and misogyny. So if we pull that apart and like deconstruct that, we're making the world better for so many people. Yeah.
That seems like a good one to end on.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, and this is Michelle signing off back to the studio.
Check out the wonderfully enthusiastic Sabah Choudrey there, being absolutely right. That was, it was a fantastic feeling the whole time. I think once the parade had passed. What did you think, Michelle?
Well, I loved their enthusiasm, and they were clearly on a high from the day because, like they said, they've been there from the beginning. And just seeing it grow and grow and grow. And I could tell that this was definitely at the centre of their heart because, like they said, like there was a need for this. Like, I guess the way I would put it was that there was like there was a collective scream from the community that needed to come out. And Sabah and Sarah, they sort of saw that need and made it happen, and are now completely astounded by how big it's gotten, which I'm going to say this again. This was a huge event.
It sure was, and fabulous to see. Long may it continue. I had such a splendid time, and so I think so did everybody, honestly. Brilliant.
I think the reason why I returned, I mean, I took a few years off because I was pretty sick for a couple of years, and there was no way I would have been able to handle a Trans Pride. So this Trans Pride meant a lot to me anyway, because it was just me stepping out. But the thing that I have always remembered from my first Trans Pride in 2014 was the next day, like, you know, for the listeners that maybe don't know, every year on the Sunday they have sort of a beach picnic.
Yes.
Which you went to.
I did.
This year, right?
I did.
You were talking about how you went swimming, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I went to the equivalent of that, and I met a lot of interesting people there. I sat with a bunch of students. I actually met, like, my first non-binary people on that day. Because, like, you know, I wasn't new to the scene, but, like, every meeting I'd been to, it was all trans women and trans men. Mostly trans men. So that was an eye-opening experience in itself. But the thing that really stuck with me was I got talking to these two cis people who turned out to be the parents of a trans kid.
I see.
And I looked around, and there was the same group of kids, like, because that year it was really small. That year there was maybe 500 people of the whole thing. And I'd seen this group of kids just playing all through the weekend. I was like, oh, they must be the kids of some trans people. It never occurred to me that they were trans. And then it hit me that, like, the stuff that our generation went through, you know, Section 28, being hidden in a closet. There are some people out there, some children out there who will never experience that. And that just filled me with so much joy. And that's what Trans Pride gave to me the first time I went. And that's what, again, happened this time by seeing all the different people from all over the place coming together and being safe, I guess, being open. Some maybe for the first time. Like, there is something to be said for being in a room full of people just like you. It's something that I don't get hardly ever in my life. And I don't think many trans people do, because there's so few of us. So just to be like, not worrying about the pitch of my voice, or not worrying about, you know, my makeup slipping and letting slip some kind of shadow, that was... I know I'm going to sound it's going to sound a bit much, but that was it was very transformative in how I thought about myself. So Sabah was absolutely right when they say that there was an urgent need for events like this.
There are now trans prides potentially cropping up in other places too. I think there's one, there's talk of one happening in the north somewhere. Was it Leeds? I can't remember. But, you know, the idea has, of course, taken a certain amount of root, and that space absolutely was needed, and it's brilliant that was just such a wonderful weekend for it with the weather and everything. So, yeah, I think we could spend the next few hours sort of gushing over everything, couldn't we? Really?
Oh yes, and if you're interested in donating to Trans Pride, which you absolutely should, just head to their website, Trans Pride Brighton. You will be able to donate there. They currently have a crowdfunder going on where they want to raise £3,000 to cover the cost of this year. They've probably reached about half of that, so go give them your money.
But not all of your money, because obviously you still need to sort of pay rent and bills and feed yourself.
Screw it, who needs food and rent?
Capitalism, sadly, which is obviously that's one of the things that we're looking at dealing with. But that's a story for another time, isn't it? So
that it is, comrade. That it is.
Indeed, we have nothing to lose but our chains. So. Moving on from the hot take and the gloriously hot, summery, gay times of Brighton to the dickhead dispatches.
Oh, God.
Yes, and we have a super duper annoyance this time in the shape of Barry Humphries, the creator of drag character Dame Edna, who has once again been a bit of a dick and said some really silly things about trans people. So after being informed by an interviewer for The Spectator that 40% of people, trans individuals, have attempted or considered suicide, Humphreys referred to the outrage from trans activists as terrible rat baggery and called being trans a fashion. But the thing is, I don't even know what that means. Rat baggery. What is that?
I think that is a t-shirt you should make, to be honest with you. I am terrible rat baggery.
Right. But I don't understand. Like, what's the
I guess it's a bag of rats. Is it a verb for putting rats in a bag? Like,
but I mean, why would you use that as an insult specifically?
Because he's an 84-year-old guy who is just sitting at home frothing at the mouth at various stories in the Daily Mail.
Yes, that's very well. I mean, this was The Spectator, wasn't it? And it was also there's been an additional problem because he suggested that evil teachers are telling kids to be transgender. And that's obviously the rhetoric of Women's Place UK, and that's the rhetoric of the people that interrupted Pride in London's parade. It's the same kind of nonsense that's being perpetuated, saying it's a social contagion, blaming it all on lefty liberal teachers forcing kids to be trans. And it's like, oh my God, that is so not what's happening, you horrible old man.
So yeah, he's been roundly condemned by many in the LGBT community. Hannah Gadsby, the stand-up comedian of the moment, from fresh off her Nanette special on Netflix, came out saying Barry Humphries loves those who hold power, hates vulnerable minorities, and has completely lost the ability to read the room. That's not a comedian. That's an irrelevant, inhuman dick biscuit of the highest order.
Dick biscuit. Nice.
God, she's brilliant.
Yes,
right?
she is.
Have you seen the special?
No, I have not, but everybody keeps telling me to, and it's a question of just sitting down and watching it. But it's on the list. Everything is on the list. But from our dickhead dispatches to our bi-weekly hero, who is it this week? Tell us the good news, my darling.
Right. Our bi-weekly hero this time is Sarah Stevenson Hunter, whose story was published in the Northern-based Chronicles newspaper this week. Basically, Sarah Stevenson Hunter had a pretty shit 2011. First, she lost her sight, then she lost her dad unexpectedly to cancer. That's a bad year for anyone, really.
That's really not a particularly pleasant run of events, is it?
So... No, but those circumstances forced her to rethink her life, and she had always felt certain gender dysphoria and decided to come out and transition. And she is now going to return to the north of England to participate in the Great Northern Run, the famous half marathon that goes all around Newcastle and stuff. It's sort of a homecoming for her because she left the north in the 90s, and she's now going to go back and run this half marathon in memory of her father, and as a way to make a stand and say, this is who I am. So Sarah, you are a goddamn hero for everything that you have been through and for returning to the north to run a half marathon, even with your current disability. That is incredible to me. So she is a goddamn hero, right? Absolutely.
That's overcoming a lot of things, isn't it? Just like, and to do two things happening all, in the same year.
And then
Jesus,
to transition.
That's no good. I know, right? That would have sort of broken lesser people. So yeah, fantastic stuff, inspiring. And that, I think, is all we've got time for, isn't it, Chuck? So thank you very much to Sabah Choudrey and Sarah Savage for talking to us. Thank you to everybody who we talked to and interacted with at Trans Pride Brighton, who was so gosh darn beautiful and wonderful and awesome. We will see you next time, Michelle.
Yep, let me just do the social. So, if you haven't already, follow us on Twitter at WhatTheTrans. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/WhatTheTrans. Go to our website, whatthetrans.wordpress.com, where you can find other information once we put stuff up there. And yes, thank you for listening. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We should harmonise that one time. Bye-bye.